Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to a title which already exists in the Criterion Collection under a Blu-ray release at spine number 779. But this year, the Criterion Collection has ventured into the physical media territory of 4K UHD. And so on this occasion, this year, the Criterion Collection has re-released this currently available title, taking advantage of this new format. And so let us focus our attention today on this title, once again designated already at spine number 779. The filmmaker is David Lynch, and the name of the film is Mulholland Drive. This is the work from 2001, and it stars, among others, in its brilliant cast, Naomi Watts and Laura Elena Herring and Justin Theroux. And of course, it is from the filmmaker, artist extraordinaire, David Lynch. This is the work, Mulholland Drive. It is powerful, it is mysterious, it is mesmerizing, it is mind-blowing. It is a true epic in that David Lynch sense in terms of scope and dynamic and the reach of it and the true emotional depth of it, the romanticism and the tragedy, as well as the absurd and the comic and the confusing, the fog and haze and smoke and mirrors of this Hollywood movie-making machine, Hollywood Los Angeles, that is at the center, the core of this film, in terms of the setting, atmosphere, and environment, with all the characters revolving around this particular mysterious and romantic locale and location. And amongst these elements, we have many different threads, many different strands, many different directions that this film, that the story can take us. Sometimes in a type of alternate fashion, maybe one mode or one thread can suddenly end and then switch into something else, oftentimes of a completely different tonal shift. Other times we might see a film, or we might get a film viewing experience that takes us into these various directions almost within the same instant, simultaneously. And that makes for some very mind-blowing experience, cinematic experience indeed, in a very, what might be described, for lack of a better phrase, Lynchian mode of cinematic experience. The Mulholland Drive provides this type of Lynchian mode of cinematic experience to the nth degree. This work, Mulholland Drive, is something special, and we have the Criterion Collection release in 2021, this year, which again is a release that is of a title that already exists in the Criterion Collection in this prior 2015, yes, Blu-ray only release, which was an excellent release. But now we have Criterion on this occasion releasing this, or re-releasing this time employing not just the Blu-ray but also the 4K UHD format. So this is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format. You get the choice of one of those two physical media options within the same new release. And we will talk about this this particular format discussion later in this video if you're interested, because it is a very interesting 4K release from Criterion indeed. So before we get into those details, let's just talk very briefly about the film itself, the plot, or the story structure, or let us attempt to. It is, again, something that is very, very complex. It is very multi-layered, as I say, multi-layered exponentially. Layers beget layers, beget layers, beget layers. Again, it goes exponentially. And it's like this wonderful, wonderful cycle where things tend to repeat, things tend to mirror, things tend to lead to oftentimes seemingly maybe points of oblivion, or points of absurdity, or points of randomness, which lead to comedy or tragedy or happiness or sadness, or whatever the case may be within the scope of the range of emotional experience of the human condition. In any event, the story, let us attempt to try to talk about this. We can focus in on the fact that, again, this is focusing in on the Los Angeles area, Hollywood specifically. And when we think about Los Angeles or Hollywood, especially in this film, we think about a number of things. We think about maybe the art and architecture and the decadence of certain areas of this particular fascinating part of the world. And we also think about the movie-making apparatus, the film factory, the place of dream making, the place of dreams. If we think of movie making associated with dreams and the dream factory aspect of the marketing appeal of the Hollywood filmmaking machine. And so this is also at the center. And then we also have in that way not just the front-facing end of that particular machine apparatus, that being the dream image, or that which is the romantic, lush, and dare I say it, perhaps even artificial, in a beautiful sense of that phrase, the artifice of the dream. We also focus in on the backroom dealings, the pressures, the powers behind the camera, and the powers behind those powers. And sometimes they lurk within the shadows. They lurk in these darkened rooms where sinister deals seem to be had. And also there is a mysterious sense of the unknown and who is controlling whom. And this type of almost maybe seemingly or having the potential of being even villainous. And even perhaps related to or not related to those levels, we have yet other strands that deal with crime, that deal with violence, that deal with some kind of real hard-edged, sinister, and yes, indeed, outwardly villainous acts against other human beings that lead to murder, bloodshed, and death. And then we have the police and detectives trying to figure out, put certain pieces of the clues together to figure out exactly what is going on. So there is the Hollywood machine apparatus, there's the dark, sinister forces, there's the crime element, there's the police procedural, there's a type of film noir element, there is art, artifice, and truth, and the genuine nature, and what is what, and who is who. And so within this, we meet a number of characters. For example, we meet the character played by Naomi Watts, who is, we understand, named Betty. And she is visiting because we understand, too, that her story seems to be involving her coming to this place of dreams, wanting to make it big as a movie star. And she comes here trying to do so, and trying to find, as the road is for any aspiring artist or actor in this industry, trying to get the audition for this particular part here and there. And so that is her modus operandi, that is her motivation in order to reach this particular place. And at the same time, along that, or intersecting with her particular story as we find it at the start of the film, we also are privy to, as viewers of the film, to another storyline which we understand, or which seems to be about this character played by Laura Herring, and this mysterious nighttime drive, which we also understand is associated with Mulholland Drive, and there is an act of potential violence and a car crash and the loss of memory. And this particular character, as we see her, finds her way to that very same location where she intersects with the Naomi Watts character, not knowing where she's coming from, not knowing who she is, claiming that she has lost her memory. Therein lies the genesis of this particular relationship between these two characters. And in the meantime, while she claims to not remember anything, let us refer to her as Rita. That is another film reference, one of many film references within this work, by the way. And so the two of them, while they are all taking care of their own particular agendas, their own particular feelings and ideas and sense of space around themselves, they are also trying to interact within the Los Angeles or Hollywood environment. And then part of that, too, is the other character which we follow. This is Adam. This is the filmmaker, and he is the Justin Theroux character. And here we find him, too, trying to make this particular film, which we understand has the potential for being the next big, hot Hollywood hit. And so all of the major actor players want to have this particular key role. And so he is in a very, very lucrative position creatively, but he is also under pressure to cast in a specific way. And herein lies the storyline regarding a particular photo of a particular actress and the mysterious phrase that is oft used, "This is the girl." And we have the pressure from outside forces, seemingly mysterious forces from the shadows, who are powered by or fueled by yet other mysterious forces that order them, and who knows what lies beyond those particular mysterious forces. And so this is the structure, the behind the scenes, the backroom deals, the darkened shadows, the seemingly sinister and perhaps villainous or even evil forces that seem to be at play, and all the pressures on Adam the filmmaker in casting this particular role in a certain way. This is the girl. Will he be able to resist that based on his own creative independence, because he feels differently? But will he be able to withhold and withstand and stand true to his own independent creative vision? Or will he succumb, or will he fold and break under this incredibly mounting pressure from all sides in order to cast the role the way that they want him to cast it? Again, as they say, this is the girl, but is it really? At least from Adam's perspective. So that's another storyline that we see. And from here we get all the various, say, scenarios that he encounters in terms of his own storyline, in terms of his personal life, in terms of the layering upon layering upon layering of his own situation, his plight. It turns comic, it turns mysterious, it turns suddenly very, very creepy and sinister. One of the highlights of the film, for me and for many other people, I'm sure, is the cowboy, and of course the playing out of the rehearsal aspect, the audition aspect. He is obviously involved because he is the sort of the creative force, the director creative force, as it were, for this particular project. And so we see a little glimpse in that. And so with all these characters, Rita, and in particular, well, the Laura Herring character, and the Naomi Watts character, and the Justin Theroux characters, these characters, they intersect in this dream place, or as dreams often sometimes are associated with. It's not just a dream place, it is also possibly a nightmare place. And their stories all intersect in this myriad of smoke and mirrors, of artifice and truth, and light and shadow. And as with things that have to do with light and shadow, when you turn a light a certain way or you change the perspective, suddenly the entire look has a potential of changing on an instant. And if and when that happens within the context of, say, a film like Mulholland Drive in the hands of David Lynch and company, you are in for a true roller coaster, because on a dime, things can shift. And when they shift, they can sometimes be so turbulent and so beautiful and magnificent to be awe-inspiring, and suddenly shifting one off balance to make us see the world from a different point of view. And that world being the emotional story, or the emotional stories of these people. And when we are shifted off balance and we see things from a different perspective of these particular intersecting stories in this dream place / nightmare place, we are in for a truly haunting, beautiful, and magnetic, emotionally resonant film that has this way of touching one's heart, that has the way of making one respond in a direct and very heartfelt way. But as with anything that is very direct and heartfelt, there is the possibility for love, and there's the possibility for warmth and affection. And also there is the possibility for deep disappointment and heartbreak. And when that happens, how one responds in terms of the human condition and the overwhelming response emotionally, and what that means in terms of one's relationships, and what one does in response to how we feel and how we react, and how far is too far, what does going too far mean, and do these characters, if and when they encounter heartbreak and disappointment, what will they do, and what will the consequences be of those decisions? This is, I think, for me, one of the great hallmark strengths that makes this film, I think, so timeless. It is a dream picture, it is a nightmare picture. It is a David Lynch work. It is also a work of endless possibility. It is a work where it makes me fall off balance, and I look at it every time. Because it makes me fall off balance, it forces me to look at it from a different perspective every single time. And I enjoy it thoroughly, and I am scared by it so thoroughly, and it makes me laugh so much. The comic scenes are genius. The scenes of warmth and magic are genius. The scenes of absurdity and randomness are genius. The scenes of shock and terror and mystery are genius. And the scenes of just overall envelopment into its world, into its mind, into its heart, through all the tools and skills and craft of David Lynch and company, whether it be the way that the lights flicker, the way that the shadow seems to fall across the screen, the way that the music hooks you and gets you, or the way that a certain piece of clothing, costume design, seems to wrestle in terms of a particular movement, or the way that the camera lingers on the seemingly innocent detail of a particular decor or background that suddenly explodes in a flash of emotion and fright and shock and awe, but at the same time always staying true to a sense of integrity of vision and beauty and seemingly something that one can feel in one's gut. It feels right. We might not understand everything that goes on. Everything that happens might be a mystery. There might be things that are just so odd, inexplicable, unexplainable, very, very random seemingly. That might happen, and indeed it does happen here and elsewhere in other Lynch works. But at the same time, there's also this sense of that invisible glue, as it were, that sense of everything we know through some kind of cinematic cosmic force of some kind. We call it the Lynchian effect, perhaps. Seemingly everything does seem to fit together. It might not always make sense in a type of logical perspective, but from an emotional and intuitive perspective, it seemingly always does. And I think that is certainly the case for a work like Mulholland Drive. This is, and it remains, to my eyes, a supremely magnetic masterpiece, and I'm swept up by it every single time. The lines, the dialogue, it's something that I think will haunt me in this deep, deep way, will haunt me to my remaining days. And I must say here too that I have oftentimes quoted some lines of dialogue. There are so many great lines of dialogue. Okay, Irene, won't that be the day? But I think for me, the one that always sticks in my mind, the one that remains true in my heart for that wonderfully random reason, don't drink all the Coke. This is Mulholland Drive, and my description can never do this film justice. It is something that deserves so much time and attention and so much care to detail and to the sense of the mysterious. And as much as I might try, I fail every time in trying to describe how it is I feel about this film. But let me now try, or I have now tried once again to do so. And perhaps in the future, at some point, we might try once again. But in the meantime, my friends, Mulholland Drive is here. It is ready to view. It is available for anyone who wants to watch it. It is a true haunting and unforgettable work, and it remains that day. It remains that way, excuse me. And I think it will always be so to my mind and to my own viewing heart as a cinema goer and as a lover of all things cinema. This is one of those works that I truly, truly love. This is the work from 2001, David Lynch's work, Mulholland Drive. The Criterion Collection has now released or re-released this film. Once again, the title currently exists in the Criterion Collection in the Blu-ray only release that was taking place, or that had taken place back in 2015. Once again, it's spine number 779, and it is right here. It is this Blu-ray release was and is just a standout. It is a standout. It is it's beautiful, and the presentation, the 5.1 surround, magnificent, and the look and the color and the palette and the feel and the tones. It all was present in this Blu-ray release, the 2015 4K digital transfer from 2015, the Blu-ray version, let's call it that. Now, this 2015 Blu-ray version is also included as one of the disc options in this new 2021 combo release. And so, just to be absolutely clear, this is the new 2021 release, and it opens like this. And if you can see in here, we have two discs. Here we have the Blu-ray, and then here we have the 4K UHD disc. So we have the two discs. The Blu-ray release is, I understand, relying on the same 2015 transfer release that was relied upon for the previous 2015 Blu-ray release from Criterion. So the Blu-ray here is, to my understanding, the same, let's call it the same as the Blu-ray that we get as one of the disc options in this new release. So for those of you who already have the Blu-ray release of this from 2015, and if you're satisfied with this, as I am, this is, I think, a very good option to keep and maintain. So, so now let me just explain further what that means, at least from my point of view. Now, that's one of the options here. The other option is, of course, the 4K UHD disc, which I've just shown here. Now, this 4K UHD disc is, I understand now, purported to be based on a 2021 restoration, 4K digital restoration of this particular work. And if you look at the booklet, which I've taken out here, it says in the back you have the information about the 2015 restoration, SDR restoration, and then you have information about the 2021 restoration on the 4K UHD disc. It says, undertaken by the Criterion Collection with the support of Studio Canal, was based on the 2015 color transfer and was newly created in Dolby Vision HDR and supervised by David Lynch. And so that's what we have with the 4K UHD offering here. So in fact, it is, I understand, a different presentation, and it's a different restoration based, again, according to the information here, based directly on the prior 2015 release or transfer. So in effect, you are getting, with this new release here, you are getting not just the 2015 Blu-ray version, you're also getting a new 2021 version of the work. So this is something that I wasn't aware of until the release actually arrived. So this is a very interesting development for me. You know, I'm very poor when it comes to keeping up with all the release transfer versions in the theaters, etc. So I always arrive late to this type of news. But when this release occurred, that's when I was able to catch up, at least to a certain degree anyway. Now, with that information, I went ahead and I experienced this in the 4K UHD format. And we should point out too that it's my understanding that this is, officially speaking, in terms of the schedule timing, this is Criterion's first 4K UHD release in its history. And so there was a lot of news, or there still is, a lot of news and a lot of attention placed upon this in that particular light. And so you can see, for instance, online, so many wonderful reviews and write-ups and impressions of many people from the vantage point of the 4K aspect and its release and the details in terms of the picture quality and the sound quality. And so if you're looking for that, I encourage you to find those, because there's so many out there, much better than anything I could ever hope to try to provide here. But in terms of my own personal impressions, I can say that, so when this arrived, I was very excited. In my home, we recently got, it's not in this room, but it's in another room, we recently got a 4K television. It's rather big, at least for us anyway. We're not used to these large screens, but we got this when the family saved up a little bit of money for a number of years, and we were able to get something that the whole family could use. And we also got a 4K player, which could play, of course, 4K discs, and then also Blu-ray discs, and then DVD discs. And then we also have, again, within our budget, we have some external speakers. They're not the greatest speakers in the world, but just some external speakers that we could turn off or on at our own option, just in case if we feel like it. All that's set up in the other room. And so what I did, and what I will do going forward with 4K releases, is I will, of course, watch the 4K version on that particular TV setup. There's another setup that I have actually in this room, which is not 4K equipped. So that'll be for the Blu-ray setup, and this is it's actually off camera. But just to let you know, so there is a 4K setup that my family has. And so, and due to the content of this, I waited until maybe the family was asleep. My wife and kids were asleep, because I don't know if this is a film that they would be interested in watching, or it would be appropriate to show my kids at the time anyway. So as soon as everyone was asleep, and I had a little bit of time to myself, or when people were out and I was alone, that's what I would watch. Films like Mulholland Drive or other 4K releases that I will talk about maybe in separate videos. And so that is the general approach that I had in terms of watching Mulholland Drive in the 4K setup. And so I concentrated as much as I could in trying to experience it in this way. And so with all that, I was very, and I should say too that going in to the 4K format, I should say too that I am not necessarily, I wouldn't consider myself to be one that is 100% with the 4K format. Now let me be very specific here. I am very supportive of format changes. I'm very supportive of advancements in the technology. I think that's very natural progress of these sorts of things. And we've seen it all the way throughout the fairly recent physical format history. If we go in the last, say, 40, 50 years or so, we can talk about Laserdiscs, VHS, DVD, or Betamax in between, DVD, Blu-ray, and then now 4K UHD. And then even before that, you could talk about 8mm, Super 8, 16mm, that sort of thing. So it becomes, this is a long-standing tradition of the development of technologies that enable, or that affect, and now even streaming too, in terms of the way in which content is delivered to the end user and the format of such delivery system. This is an ongoing developmental change that is either commanded by or the market and certain market forces that are maybe organically within, or maybe those market forces are applied externally by certain key players within the market. So this is the sort of ebb and flow of that type of market force development, and physical media is one such market, and so I get that, and so therefore the 4K UHD format is obviously one of those further developmental steps. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm always automatically behind such steps. I still favor other formats, because other formats and other releases oftentimes do provide huge benefits. Huge benefits in terms of maybe prior release versions that maybe aren't necessarily fully reflected in subsequent releases in different formats. Maybe there are certain changes or certain details or aspects that make one prefer, say, a previous format version over, say, a newer release. Vice versa is, of course, true. Maybe things that weren't available in a prior release now become available in a stellar way, in a celebratory way, in a new version. So I don't, this is my way of saying I don't always, I'm not for, I'm not against it in any default position. It's always a type of case-by-case basis and just how one feels. Now, that being said, I am also a fan of the Criterion collection, and so of course I'm very curious, very, very curious as to what this 4K format will look like and will sound like in the hands of the people at Criterion. And especially since we have the earlier Blu-ray release, what will that mean? And what will this mean in terms of the future of Criterion and 4K? So all of this is my very long-winded way of saying that this was my kind of mindset going into watching this 4K release of Mulholland Drive. And I watched it, I listened to it, and in fact I was so taken with it that I kind of was stunned by it, and then I needed some time off, and then I revisited it again after some time, I think a few days. And then I watched it again, and again I was by myself. My family was either out or so I was by myself. And so I watched it again, and it really floored me. Now, and I was incredibly impressed with this 4K UHD presentation and sound that's available on the 4K UHD disc here in this new release from Criterion. I was incredibly impressed. This was amazing to me. Now, I could actually say that it doesn't mean that everyone has to get the 4K. You don't have to get the 4K UHD release. The Blu-ray release is, and the Blu-ray 2015 restoration, or that version, still remains stellar. It's magnificent. So if you already have that, that's fine. Or if you have it in another non-Criterion label release, that's fine too. There's nothing that says you have to get the new 4K UHD release. Of course not, right? Of course, that's your choice. That's your decision based on your needs as a consumer. That's great, right? And that's your choice, 100% your choice. But for me and for what I chose to do, getting this and watching this, with certain reservations I had prior to watching it in terms of the format, I came out completely floored. Now, maybe 100% there are similarities. I mean, I should say, for the most part, I could say that there are certain similarities. Like the 2015 version, when compared to the 4K 2021 version, it still holds up incredibly well, and there are a lot of similarities. There are a couple of differences, though, a few differences perhaps, that I caught. Now, I haven't been able to catch everything. I have to keep watching it and watching it more. And again, I'm still getting used to this new 2021 version. But a couple of things that came to mind. For example, there are certain bits of the sound that seem to really just pop out all of a sudden, that linger. And they seem to be a little bit louder, a little bit more pronounced than those same moments that occurred in the 2015. Now, I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying I just noticed that. So that's one thing. Another thing, too, is, how should I explain it? Maybe there's an example I could bring. I'll try to be as vague as possible. There's a particular character in, there's a scene fairly early on involving a character in a type of maybe meeting room with other people there, and a cup and drinking espresso, the espresso drinking scene. And in all the, I've seen the film so many times, I guess I've just never noticed it before, but the cup is white It's a white cup. It's a small cup, you know, the espresso-sized cup that one drinks. I guess. I'm not that much of an espresso drinker myself, but I'm assuming this is the standard espresso cup size. But any event, it has a white color to it. The cup does. And I guess I'd never noticed it before, but when I saw the 2021 version, I noticed more that there were actually some stains on the outside of the cup that were very pronounced. And I saw, wow, those are stains on the cup? Wow, that's interesting. Why would, and that led me to think, why would these people present this cup, which is a very important espresso, it has so much significance, this espresso cup, this espresso. Why would they give this cup, which has a little bit of a noticeable coffee stain on the side there? It's something that I didn't notice before, but then I went back to the Blu-ray 2015 release, and I watched that particular scene, and I thought, oh wait, it's right there, you're right, I can see it. It's a little bit faded, but I can see it in the 2015 release version. And then I went back to the 4K UHD version, I see. So in other words, that little detail is an example of where you can see those real pronouncements of details that maybe were there, but just my eye wasn't able to catch it until I could see it in this different format or presentation. So now, what do I prefer? Again, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking about this little stain on the cup, and I think, why? It makes me wonder about this particular setup and about these characters who are giving this cup over to this person, this very important person to begin with. And so that led me down this type of rabbit hole of possibility and idea, and just thinking about, why would they do this? Why would they? So that type of detail that emerged to me in the 2021 4K UHD release, that's an example of the type of new discovery for me, and it became a lot of fun. And there were other little things that happened like that along the way, whether it's a different maybe shade of color, maybe slightly more pronounced, maybe a red or maybe slightly darker shadow than what I'm used to, or what my eye is used to from the many times of watching the 2015 release, etc. So those things are happening. Now, I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm not saying that the 2021 release is automatically better. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that it is providing yet another playground, if you will, for possibility of exploration. And ultimately, maybe at the end of the day, I might think of those comparisons and I might think, that's great, but ultimately I will prefer the 2015 over the 2020. That's possibly what happened. The opposite might be true. I might, at the end of the day, prefer the 2021 version over the 2015 version. It really depends, and it really depends on you. If you feel like you are very much comfortable and okay with the prior release, that is fantastic, and I encourage you to do that. And plus, also, you know, the 4K UHD equipment setup, it can cost a certain degree of money as well. So it's a pretty significant financial investment, and I understand those details as well. So I understand those quite directly. So. There are all these various concerns. So at the end of the day, while I wouldn't call it essential, I would say it is proving to me to be a very almost maybe wonderful playground for a lot of fresh, potentially fresh discovery for me. At the same time, I'm still very happy with the prior release. So again, it's up to you and how you feel. But for me, with all that, I am still very happy with this new 4K release. I am floored. It is making me discover new things. Whether those discoveries will be things that I prefer, or do I prefer things kept hidden in the shadow, mystery. Again, after all, with the world of Lynch, mystery and shadow and the unknown. This is also very important. Sometimes it's important to not know than it is to know. And that is certainly true in a lot of aspects for cinema, certainly in the aspects of Lynch. Sometimes it's better to not know than it is to know. And there's some value to that. And so I think in that type of mindset too, I think this debate in my own head about which I prefer, this newer version or the prior version, that might continue. And then finally too, at the end of the day, does it really matter? Does this discussion really matter? Or perhaps this is yet another example of the further myriad possibilities of how to view this film, much like the characters within the film itself. Once you look at it from a different direction, things change, but you always have the prior vantage point, the prior viewpoint, which is also equally as valid. And that's certainly true for all the characters here, and that's probably will be true going forward for these current releases, and indeed perhaps too with further advancements in technology, the potential of future restoration release versions to come in the following years, in the immediate future and beyond, of course. So again, the possibilities are endless. This is again the beginning of the discussion. What you prefer in terms of your own viewpoint, that is the most important, so keep that in mind. But this is my approach coming into this particular Criterion 4K UHD release, Mulholland Drive. I should say now that we have this 4K UHD disc and then also the Blu-ray disc, so the two discs. We should say too that the 4K UHD disc does not have the supplement section. The supplements will be found on the Blu-ray disc. And to be even more specific, the Blu-ray disc supplements are in fact those supplements that we found in the 2015 Blu-ray release. And so what are those supplements? Just to go over those right now. We have an interview section in the supplements menu. So the interview section is further divided into a number of subcategory, not sad, actually very happy, but subcategory of interviews. And so those interviews are, first is David Lynch and Naomi Watts. This is the first one. This is approximately 26 minutes. This is again described in the menu as being from 2015, or it's copyrighted 2015, I think, at the end. And this is wonderful. We have the two of them sitting together in the same room, and David Lynch. It's wonderful. It's always great to hear from David Lynch directly. I mean, there are a lot of works of David Lynch in the collection, but actually, one thinks about it, it's somewhat a rare thing. It's not wholly rare, but it's somewhat of a rare thing to have actually David Lynch directly speaking about something in terms of the background. There's a type of legend about his filmmaking and his approach, about how there's this idea about how maybe he tends to prefer not to talk about what the meaning of his films are or something like that. But it's in that vein, or in that mode, it's still very wonderful to hear from him directly about certain ideas or certain background details. And that is certainly the case here in this wonderful interview, so I'm glad it's carried over. And so he and she, and Naomi Watts too, they talk about their viewpoints about what this film what it evokes, or what it suggests, the mood of Los Angeles, the stories regarding this particular location, Mulholland Drive, and talking about, or Naomi Watts too, talking about getting the role, and just her struggles trying to get auditions leading up to this particular role in this particular film in Hollywood. And the whole thing about what the process of David Lynch and the casting process. There's going to be an interview with Joanna Ray in a separate supplement. We'll talk about that momentarily. But the idea about the headshot and how ultimately this was Naomi Watts fell into the role, and she was able to get the role. And David Lynch was so pleased, and is pleased, because it was, and it is, a dynamite. It is extraordinary. It is an extraordinary performance, and this is it's just great to hear these details about how she was ultimately cast in this particular film. And then also there's discussions too a little bit about how this film was actually, it was first a pilot, as some of you may know. It was planned to be a TV pilot, and as a television pilot, and what that means essentially is that it would be this in essence an actual proposal for a potential TV series, and this would be the proposal that the creative forces would make. They would give to the executive powers that be, in the hopes that those executive powers that be, television, ABC, they would, in the United States, they would choose it to develop into a long-running series. So this was the idea in terms of a TV pilot version of Mulholland Drive. But then, of course, we understand too that it was not picked up as a TV series, so it did not become a series. And so at a certain point during the production, it was done. There was no hope for it. But then certain investors from other places came in, and they were able to resuscitate this particular storyline. And so this provided the opportunity to Lynch to turn the currently existing stuff with some extra stuff to blend into it, to turn that into an organic whole that would now become what we understand to be the feature film that is Mulholland Drive. And so it is a very circuitous, topsy-turvy, long and winding road of a production story, much like the Confusing Swirl and the route of Mulholland Drive itself, perhaps. This is a really fascinating story. And so this also explains, too, perhaps how in a type of TV pilot language landscape, there are so many characters that we maybe meet that emerge suddenly and very quickly, but then they disappear again. Will we see them again or won't we? We focus in on maybe certain characters a lot, other characters we meet and then suddenly we maybe never see them again. I think the idea that this was originally designed as a TV pilot helps perhaps to explain that had this been a TV series, we probably would have seen more of those characters that we meet in sort of fleeting moments, momentarily, less than a minute or something, even in some cases. So we would have probably seen more of those characters had this been a series. But alas, or perhaps not alas, maybe it turned out well in the end, because ultimately we have what it ended up being, which is the film that is Mulholland Drive. And so they talk, this is just, these and other reasons, these points emerge in this duo interview between with the two of them. And they also talk with a very frank nature about certain intense scenes, certain scenes of, of a sexual nature. And they talk about the difficulty of shooting such scenes, and but how they try to shoot it with integrity and with as much levels of comfort as possible. There's also great anecdotes about the music, Angelo Badalamenti, and a great anecdote about Angelo Badalamenti and Blue Velvet, by the way. And there's a phrase here that's wonderful: it's sound and picture flowing together in time. That seems so beautifully Lynchian. And there's some more information about, for example, Rebecca Del Rio, the significance of, there's a very powerful scene involving silencio. So this is also spoken about. Ann Miller is talked about. Monty Montgomery, who plays the very, very memorable cowboy, talking a little bit about the behind the scenes about shooting that particular scene between him and Justin Theroux. And Justin Theroux, in another interview, will talk more about this. Beautiful, beautiful comments here. It's another tour de force interview. Again, it was already present in the 2015 release, but you can get it here again on the Blu-ray disc here. So this is the interview with Naomi Watts and David Lynch. This is approximately 26 minutes. And then continuing on in the interview section, we have the next set of interviews, or the next supplement, which is a set of interviews that's edited together into one supplement. So one is with Laura Herring, and one other is Joanna Ray, and another is Justin Theroux, and then the other is with Naomi Watts. And so these four are interviewed separately, but then it is all edited together into this one flowing supplement, and totaling 35 minutes. And so Joanna Ray is talking about the casting process, first meeting David Lynch, and how David Lynch likes to employ a certain type of casting process. There's a very interesting, wonderfully idiosyncratic way that David Lynch operates in terms of the casting. And Naomi Watts spoke about this in the other supplemental interview, and she speaks a little bit about it here in the moments where she appears in this particular part. Laura Herring also talks about this too, about her casting process. And there's a certain moment of maybe fate, in terms of she was involved in around that timing. She was involved in a very minor, maybe car accident. It wasn't a major car accident, so no one, according to her, was injured. So that was very fortunate. But there was still some minor level accident, and how that, in her mind, was linked to the accident that occurs at the very start of the film. So that has this very odd ring of life and art seemingly echoing each other. And then Laura Herring is also talking about the casting process, how it took some time, and also meeting David Lynch and what ultimately happened. So, and then her role and how it changed her career, and that also Naomi Watts too, how this role changed her career. It just catapulted them to just other heights of their career professionally. And they were also talking about certain scenes of sensitivity and how David Lynch was very respectful of this, and also the change from the TV pilot shooting to the certain time that it took between that and the ultimate resuscitation of the project, etc. So these are great comments. And then the interview section has one more, which is a set of interviews that are edited together into one supplement. One interview being with Peter Deming, the director of photography, and the other being with production designer Jack Fisk. And so this is great. Approximately 22 minutes overall. Jack Fisk, of course, talks about knowing David Lynch from an early age, since childhood. He says they met in 9th grade, according to Jack Fisk. And of course, working on Eraserhead, the handmade craft of that particular approach, and then being production designer, working with Lynch again on Straight Story, which is another great work. I hope to be able to talk about the Straight Story on this channel one of these days. And then of course now his work on Mulholland Drive. And then Peter Deming, talking about working with David Lynch for the first time. He mentions around 1991 in one of the episode portions of another series called On the Air, which is another great series, which one day, if the opportunity presents itself, I have some VHS tapes of On the Air, which is really great. And then now they're talking, the two of them, from their own approaches, working with Lynch, this idea of the focus on the old Los Angeles Hollywood feel, and talking about reading and examining the scripts and then trying to work and imagine what it is they have to provide and capture in terms of photography and also in terms of the production design. And then the details, for instance, in terms of design, the details surrounding, say, Jack Fisk talks about the house, Adam's house, the Justin Theroux character. Also talking about Silencio. That's a very important sequence. Also talking about Winkies. This is also a very important sequence. And the red drapes, the Roque character, the red drape, Mr. Roque, and so, and how Lynch loves these drapes, as some of you who know Lynch works probably recognize as well. So for these and other reasons, and just working with Lynch directly. So this is another great interview, again carried over from the 2015 release, but essential. So the Peter Deming and Jack Fisk interviews together, edited in this one supplement, totaling 22 minutes. Supplements then continue with a deleted scene, and this deleted scene is described as being interior Hollywood police station day. And this is approximately 2 minutes, and this is focusing in on two police detective characters with a lovely kind of rapport. We meet them actually in the actual film itself. At the very start of the film, the detectives, Brent Biscoe and Robert Forster. And so here we have their interaction in one scene. It's a brilliant scene, and I just love, there's one character that does a lot of talking and another character that primarily does a lot of listening. And we're just listening to this particular dialogue, and the more we listen to the details, the more we're thinking, what is going on here? This is very absurd, and it leads to a conclusion that is so, it's so police procedurally brilliant, and it leads to the next step that they have to do as detectives. But it's just that, again, that circuitous, roundabout way of going to that particular point. It's funny, it's absurd, it's random, and it's just a revelation of their characters and their approach and the like. And so it's a wonderful inclusion in this deleted scene form anyway. It's very short, again, approximately 2 minutes, but well worth it if you haven't seen it already. And then we continue on with the supplements with what's called on-set footage. This is 24 minutes, and so this is essentially videotape footage that's taken as the scenes are being shot on location on the day. So for example, there's some scenes about Winkies. There's some stuff in Winkies, the diner, dropping certain things, Lynch on set trying to plan out things. There's a particular quote that you can hear him say. He says about a certain take, he says, "I like that almost better than ice cream." For those details and others, that's one of the great gifts that one can receive when one is watching this on-set footage. There's also this maybe on-set video footage of other scenes like the drive, the walk-up. There's a very powerful scene involving characters walking up a hill to a particular house. There's working on set with or on location with the particular actors and performers. Badalamenti is also, and the people in the crew as well. And so this is really essential stuff. Just to see everyone in action, and just to see those scenes, and just all the care and the timing and the effort to put this stuff together, and you can just get a sense of how much effort it took and how much planning it took. So that's great. So the on-set footage, approximately 24 minutes. And then the supplements end with a trailer, and this is the trailer that rounds out the supplements. Again, we're not getting anything new in the sense of the supplements that we had seen in the 2015 release, but that's okay because what we're getting is wonderful. I would say perhaps one thing which is if Criterion had been able to include the actual pilot version of Mulholland Drive as part of the supplements, that would have been, I think, that would have been like icing on the cake. It would have been like ice cream, to borrow a phrase from David Lynch. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Actually, I always go back and forth with this. Maybe it's for the best that the pilot version is not included as a supplement, because this work, ultimately, it was almost fate. One could think of it as fate that it didn't exist as a pilot work. And so perhaps it wasn't meant to be regarded as a pilot work, even as a what-if scenario or a supplement scenario. So while I would have loved to have seen the pilot version included, and perhaps it might be possible to see the pilot version elsewhere, but in any event, in terms of an inclusion in the supplement version, in the supplements, while it would have been really interesting to have it included in the supplements, and while sometimes on some days I feel, it would have been great to have it included, on other days I can understand why it's not included, because again, this is a film, this is the girl, to put it in, to borrow a phrase, this is the film. The film is Mulholland Drive. It doesn't exist in any other form. It is what it is. And so to have any other alternate version might blur that, or might make a different impression of what the work actually is. And so I can understand why it's not included. And so, but in any event, that's something that's once in a while I have a feeling of. But that, I think, ultimately is a minor point for the reasons I've just stated. Overall, the supplements themselves are top-notch, peachy keen. And then I should talk about the booklet, and here's the booklet with the release, and it has the wonderful excerpt from the Chris Rodley interview book with David Lynch. And so if you haven't read that, that's really great. I actually had a copy of that a long time ago, and I read it thoroughly and so many times, and so it's wonderful to get that excerpt regarding Mulholland Drive here. For purposes of that. I mean, we had it in the prior 2015 release, but it's great to have it here for this current release. And the booklet, too, has the same layout, the same or similar use of photos, as does the presentation itself. So we're getting that continuity with the extra details on the final pages of the booklet, of course, focusing in on the 2021 restoration. I should say, too, that in terms of continuity, we have on this side we have the prior 2015 release. On this side we have the 2021 release, and it looks, as you can see, in terms of height, the dimensions seem to be the same. Maybe in terms of thickness, we're getting a little bit of a thicker package here for the new 2021 release, but I think that's due to the fact that it has to house a second disc as well. So we're getting a little bit of a thickness difference, but not too much. For the most part, the continuity remains the same with regards to these releases. And so this is the new release, the 2021 release of Mulholland Drive. And so, my dear friends, that is it as far as my comments regarding this particular release from Criterion, from the Criterion collection of this remarkable, mesmerizing, and magnificent work of art from 2001 from David Lynch, which is called Mulholland Drive. If you have any thoughts or comments about this work, please let me know in the comments section below. As always, I would very much love to hear what it is you have to say, my dear friends. This is a work that is so exciting. It is so fun to talk about with others, to hear other interpretations about it, and to hear from you about how you view this work, details that you interpret and how you derive certain meanings from it, and to hear your thoughts and comments about this and other works by Lynch, of course, but in particular about this work, Mulholland Drive, upon this occasion of this new Criterion release. As always, my dear friends, I would always love to hear what it is you have to say. So with that, my friends, thank you so much, and I hope this video finds you well wherever you are in the world, and please continue to be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.